Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers podcast. Today I'm joined by Ankit, who's head of AI at Inscope. Inscope have built an AI powered financial reporting and audit automation platform. That's a bit of a mouthful. What we're doing today is we're uncovering some poignant topics around truths in LLMs and agentic architectures. We'll be exploring what is an LLM, what's an agentic architecture, and almost when to use which and how. Ankit, take us away. Do you want to give us a bit of an intro into you, your background, and also set the scene for us on Inscope?
Yeah. Hey, Ankit. Started my career as a machine learning engineer, and was just you know kind of early days building models and like traditional, what you will call now more traditional ML models, like the pre-LLM era. Dwelled into a bit of product management at companies such as Meta, like again building ML products, mostly in the B2B space. And then as I kind of like was following the industry and like LLMs were surfacing, this is kind of a little bit of pre-chat GPT when like the GPT-3 models were there, and they could predict, you could start seeing the elements of text generation. And like, if you squint your eyes enough, you could see, oh, this is something might become something. I didn't imagine it's going to, transformed the way it did. So then I kind of came back into engineering and sort of like tried starting my own company in market research, and then more recently have been leading AI at Inscope for about a year or so.
Lovely. What's that been like leading AI at Inscope in this new age of post LLMs? What's it been like?
It's very different if I contrast it to just like the world that we used to build in, just like when LLMs were not available, from both uh, vectors. Like the vector one being just sheer engineering productivity, right? Like that with like tools such as Cursor, like or having like chat windows has just like massively gone up, and the amount of output as kind of the engineering output we're making with such a small team, which is you couldn't imagine it like before LLM era, right? And second is like I remember building classification models, like getting the data set, cleaning the data set, uh, measuring the performance, and like deploying to production. That would sometimes take like a quarter at a company, and now you can just do it in a matter of like days, right? So it's just like insane at the level that you can operate now. And obviously the capabilities of the ML system have also increased significantly.
Yeah. The speed, efficiency, productivity. I'm not necessarily preaching to the preached, but it's ridiculous in terms of where businesses are now and how fast they can actually build stuff to where it was 12 months ago.
Yeah, completely agree.
Give us a bit of an insight into InScope and your role at InScope.
Yeah, so at Inscope, we have this vision of like we want to automate kind of the grunt work of financial reporting. It's a very cumbersome process, and mostly people have kind of hacked together Microsoft Word and Excel, and like they spent like countless hours like formatting the table. If anyone has tried formatting even their resume on Word, like they probably know the pain. So imagine now formatting like complex tables. So it's just like a lot of process that goes into preparing the financial statements. And the need for accountants has been industry has been increasing, but there are like very less and less every year accountants graduating. So there's like a dire need of like more accountants. So Inscope kind of comes in and is trying to fill that gap, and we want to kind of automate that whole process. And our vision is like you come in, let's say end of the year, you drop in whatever documents that are needed, like your contracts, your integration with like NetSuite or QuickBooks, and like we just take it over from there, right? And it's almost becomes like a TurboTax self finding experience rather than like spending countless hours on it.
Yeah, love it. Great insight. And I do feel what you're building in scope, and you could actually look at where other companies are building products with LLMs at the moment. They really amplify the role of an accountant or insert any other business type. I know there's a lot of conversation around replacements, but at the moment, they're really amplifying people's ability to do their work a lot faster and efficiently.
Yeah, I don't think AI is at a place where it's just gonna take away like you definitely need a lot of expertise. I think opens opportunity for a lot of other people. Like for example, like coding is a great example. Like people are now vibe coding and like deploying apps, but it's making coding and building stuff more accessible, and I feel that's a good thing. And I don't think that reduces the need for like talented engineers, because you can't vibe code a production application. And obviously these systems are going to get better, and we'll see like the roles shift and the responsibility shift. Maybe it becomes less about like writing code, but more about like writing really tight requirements, thinking more about system design and architecture, and like thinking about, hey, how are we going to serve like x number of people or like meet these security standards, right, rather than just more focus on just like writing raw code. So that's, I would see that transforming across like maybe other industries as well.
I share that as well. I do share that from what I've been seeing, absorbing, reading, and listening to all the experts. I probably share that mindset at the moment as well. Um, we do want to talk about LLMs. We want to talk about agentic architectures, big conversations at the moment about when to use one and what they look like. Break those down for us. What's an LLM? What's an agentic architecture?
Yeah, so LLM, I think now we were kind of like started interchangeably using with ChatGPT. That was kind of like the first big moments that happened. And now there are like multiple services, Mistral, Anthropic, Meta has like open source stuff, obviously OpenAI. So LLMs are these like these deep learning models, to be more specific, like transformer based architectures. And really they kind of started as predicting the next word. So they were just like, next token predictor. So they were trained on like large pieces of text, and with attention mechanism, they would like, we were training it to predict like the sentence completion, right? And obviously then like more techniques kind of came in, like reinforcement learning, where you took in a foundational model and you trained it on like question answering format, and which kind of led to ChatGPT. And the systems have evolved kind of from there, to kind of what we call like, which we're using kind of as APIs now without even kind of thinking about it. Uh, so then how you use LLM in kind of you know to whatever business you might be in, there are like two foundational ways, right? Like you can use as LLM workflows, which are, or like agents, which seems to be kind of like everyone is kind of talking about agents and how they're going to just take over. So what is, let's kind of define what is an agent, versus what is an LLM workflow. So I think agent kind of experiences anything that doesn't have like a set of like predetermined steps, right? So you have like your LLM, like your base LLM, like a Chat GPT or like a Claude from Anthropic, and you like hook it up with like different tools, and you document like, here are kind of the tools that are available. And then it can operate with like some ambiguous input of like, hey, do this task X, and like some definition of like what the outcome that the user is trying to get. And then the LLM has kind of this agency over what tools to use, what to critique, with some probably predefined guidance to sort of work towards accomplishing a certain task, right? But like the key element is like the number of steps or the path it needs to follow, that's not defined, right? The LLM is just gonna, based on kind of the input and the output requirements, it's gonna define that. An LLM workflow is a more tightly defined application, which is you're using LLM as a tool to accomplish a certain task, and you can have like n different LLM calls within that, but the steps have been predefined. Like one example I'll give you is in kind of financial, like a setup. We deal with a lot of documents. So one of our LLM workflow is you can drop in a PDF. We'll take that PDF, extract all the data out of it, and then we'll separate out tables and text, and then we will post process the text. And every step is using LLMs, but like every step is predefined. It has a lot of rigor and validation. So I feel uh, like if you have a task that is that has like a high consistency constraints and like a specific contract of input and output, that's where LLM workflows are very powerful. But if you're dealing with like a more open-ended task where like a customer support or someone actually working with a tool in a creative process where the task output doesn't need to be exactly right, but kind of like the user can kind of take on and iterate with it, that's more like an agent's workflow kind of setup where we want to leverage that.
Got you. And I'm really pleased that you said that, because that probably ties into my next point and next couple of questions quite nicely. Open, as in open conversation, agents, closed questions, LLMs. That's probably how I would just define it off your explanation. If I'm thinking about building AI into my architecture and understanding where we want to use it and what we should be doing with AI, that's probably a really good approach just based on what you've just said.
And I would say to make it or more precise, right? Like the pillars I see for kind of evaluating the task and choosing, hey, which direction should I go, is defining kind of like what is the capability I want from the model. So what is my fault tolerance level from like the LLM, right? Like in a financial space, it's like close to zero, right? Uh, what's the sort of reliability you need from the system? That means if I'm going to give the same input, I want the same output every single time, right? And LLMs are probabilistic, so this is kind of a hard one. And then latency, like what are you designing for? So agents, for example, like a lot of the times can have like much higher latency. Even workflows can be like especially for the complex one. So these three things I think are like a very important thing given the task that you need to think through. That what do you want out of the system, and that's going to help you narrow down the path that you should take.
Okay, that's really good context. Can you walk us through some successful implementations that you've seen, that you've been involved in, almost like case studies or use cases of where you've been able to apply that at Inscope?
Yeah. So for example, one of the very important tasks that happens before you submit a financial statement is you have like these bunch of tables. This is applies to both public and private companies. Like you have like a balance sheet, you have an income statement, you have a cash flow statement, and you want to better want to make sure that all the numbers that you're listing there are tie up together, right? So there are no addition or subtraction mistakes, right? So in that case, it's you need like if so we're using kind of LLM to kind of understand firstly where the table exists in the document, what kind of table it is, and then embed special domain knowledge about those tables. Like what is a balance sheet? What should it capture? What are some special rules? To figure out, hey, what are the fields that we need to check for, like what do you call footing, which is like essentially like addition and subtraction of like certain fields. So that was a task that requires like probably you don't need very low latency, like user can wait like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, but you need really high performance out of the system, and you need really high reliability, and reliability in the sense that if I run, let's say, an agent check all my tables and I do it 3 times, you don't want like different results to show up, because like these documents are to go to auditors, like they're gonna be checked for correctness, and like there are like serious consequences of mistakes, right? So that's why we kind of leaned over to solving this problem via an LLM workflow, uh, and sort of embedding that kind of domain knowledge. Um, and sort of that's kind of one example. But I see, like, just to sort of like argue against kind of what I'm saying as well, is as kind of these systems gets better, you can technically wrap an LLM workflow as a tool for an agent to use. So you can imagine an agent, just like calculator is a tool. Now it has like this very complex LLM workflow as a tool, and it can choose to use that tool at its own disposal, right? So I can see that framework evolving, but I think that's kind of the current state of things at the moment.
Yeah, I want to explore frameworks and custom implementations. We were going to talk about that and what makes something actually effective in production. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think this is probably kind of an opinionated view, coming obviously out of like
Love it.
practice and just been in the space trying to productionize stuff for the last 2 years. So I think the first question is choosing frameworks versus like interacting with the APIs, direct LLM APIs directly, and sort of like building your own custom stuff, right? I started with like using LangChain, which was kind of like a very popular tool when kind of all of this started. And within just like a week of working with it, I was like, this is not going to scale for me, because most of the complexity, if you kind of understand, is in the prompts, and and kind of the creativity is like, how do you want to attach different pieces together. So my recommendation is generally like, it's much better to just interface with the APIs directly, and just like hook systems together, because like you will get tied by the framework, and like if you have to go into the framework and change their source code, like then what's kind of the value they're adding, right? I mean, there's whole, this is kind of controversial. There are like a bunch of threads on Hacker News about this, on people hating or kind of liking this. I think frameworks make it much more accessible for people who just want to do a certain task, might not understand the details. I think that's, if you have like a very simple task, I think frameworks are a good place to start with. But if you are, starting your own company and you're getting into something super complex, I would rather like, kind of bite the bullet and like build the stuff by yourself. And I think that's going to pay a lot of dividends later.
Love it. Okay. There are some trade-offs that I do actually want to talk about as well. Like we've touched on a couple of points: fault tolerancy, scalability. We've just touched on observability. I think is going to be a really big thing as AI progresses, as language models progress. Talk to us about what you're noticing across those three things, plus more abilities, if you like.
Yeah. So I think like what you're really asking is like, what is important to have like a successful production application like running, and right. So I feel like the so you need like few key elements, right? Like one is, you have to realize these systems don't have the same level of reliability like we're used to, of like the five nines of like 999.99. Like, OpenAI goes down much more often. The specific models performance might degrade, and so you need like some way of like fallback mechanisms. So like using an AI gateway in production that can like gracefully fall back without impacting your users. So for users, it doesn't matter where the results come from, right? Whether it's a GPT 4.0 or like Claude 3.7, like they don't care. So setting that up in terms of kind of like fallback scenarios and like load balancing, that can go a long way in like productionizing these systems successfully. Second is like validation. Having validation on any kind of like output you're getting from LLM is like super critical. So if you're building in Python, Pydantic is just an amazing library uh, that to use. And I've generally avoided to getting locked into a certain vendor. So OpenAI has structured outputs, Anthropic doesn't. The problem is if you start using OpenAI's structured outputs, well, now you can't easily change models, right? So like using Pydantic and like maybe just separating out that structured output layer, uh, so you can like easily move across the model, like is kind of an ability, because you never know, right? This place is so competitive, like the model performance, like every month there is a new model that just gets better. so,
Yeah, it's
so I think
crazy.
that, yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say it's crazy. You clearly know your stuff. You've been playing around with this. for years. And you have mentioned a couple of points, especially when we were talking around frameworks or custom implementations, maintaining a good level of scalability. I can imagine once you really start to get in depth with LLMs, different architectures, that can present a challenge, I imagine. What would you say your top tips to people are to maintain a simplistic architecture where AI can just fit into that and you're thinking about future scalability? What would your top tips for people to think about would be?
Yeah, I would say whatever you're trying to do, just start simple. Uh, like write a prompt through, like run it through a prompt optimizer and see how it performs. Don't try to overcomplicate things right at the beginning. So in traditional machine learning, people would say use logistic regression before using anything else. If a simple tool can do your job, you don't need to complicate it. Uh, I think that's one. Observability is extremely important. So using a tool like LangFuse or Keywords AI, those like will really help you trace down like the whole chain of like your LLM calls and the outputs that it's producing. So I would say that we already talked about validation. Yeah, I think those would be kind of my kind of like biggest tips to kind of like taking these things to production and not getting bogged down in it.
Applying the basic, simple fundamentals of science, technology, ensuring you're doing the right thing.
If you get stuck on a task, then yeah, the easiest path is breaking down that problem into smaller subcomponents. It's like you if you have a massive puzzle, like let's try it by very small and smaller components, right? Like don't try to tackle the whole thing at the same time. It's just same logical things that you have to apply here, and then you can like progressively go to like more complex stuff around fine tuning the models and like taking user feedback and like trying to improve the models based on that. Like all of that is for later, but I think to just get started, these
Yeah.
things are good enough.
Can you walk us through some of Inscope's implementations? Walk us through lessons, walk us through some successes. Want to hear a little bit more about the Inscope journey.
Yeah, so I think like I'll tell you kind of this one example because it doesn't require a lot of like financial domain understanding. Is taking in someone drops in a PDF, you need to now figure out to port it over to kind of your document format. One of the big things in kind of financial sector is like they will roll forward a document, and what that means is it goes from 1 year to the next. So they will report the kind of the last 2 years. So everything needs to change. All the tables, columns needs to shift. It's kind of like this very manual task that people do Command F or Control F, like replace all of the dates that they would try to find, and we automated all of this through LLM. And it's kind of like a magical experience, right? You come in, you drop your PDF, and like 5 minutes later, you have like a whole roll forwarded document, which people would like, as you talk to our customers, they would spend anywhere about a day or two just like and like burning their kind of eyeballs just like rocking at the screen to to place all these numbers. And and what some of the lessons we kind of learned there was is really this message I had to kind of like embody that is just break things down to subcomponents to get reliability out of these systems. Because the biggest problem is you run it once and oh, it works, and then you try 2 or 3 different times, it still works, and you're like, okay, this is kind of good to go. And then you kind of ship it, and then your whoever your business partner is, and not someone or your customer is using it, and they use it, and they're like, oh, this doesn't work. Like, what are you talking? So, like, that's kind of the importance. I think I forgot to kind of touch upon it was like then we kind of really spent time on building these evaluation data sets and like testing things, and and it's like you said, like things that you would typically do in like software engineering, machine learning, like writing good evaluation sets, unit tests. Don't fix skip it with LLMs just because they give you this perception of you're automating a task and it just works in one try. Like, to make these systems reliable, like breaking things down into very small components and not making them do like a lot of work at a single go. I really had like this is all just learned by trial and error. There's just no playbook. The playbook is being written as we kind of get along, right, in this journey. So everyone is just these are new tools, and everyone is figuring out how to play with them.
Yeah, it really is. Where do you think the playbook's going? And it's hard to predict the next 12 months, but the next 3 to 6 months, where do you think the AI playbook is going?
I I definitely feel that the models are getting more and more powerful. So the and I think that's going to help kind of the agentic system to evolve a lot more. So as the inference becomes cheaper, so look, right now we haven't seen much apart from the image space. There is like very limited application in kind of the consumer software. And I think as inference gets cheaper, this is just gonna permeate like every kind of tool we interact with. So I think that's definitely going to happen. As these LLMs get better, I think we're gonna start seeing impact across the whole industry. I think there is this argument going on where I think Anthropic CEO kind of wrote this big essay on kind of like how you can have like thousands of Einsteins on kind of like a single data center. Uh, I I'm kind of more of like the Jan LeCun's camp of where I think that's not how we're gonna have like breakthrough AGI or anything. Uh, uh, but I feel these tools are just gonna get better. They're gonna have like a very significant impact around all kinds of work we do. And I'm really excited about is they start becoming more centralized and start permeating through like the consumer stuff as well. So now like it's not just like a general purpose tool like ChatGPT, but like your daily life interaction just gets a lot better, and not just like the knowledge workers who are just reaping the benefits.
Love it. Okay. What does this mean for the future of InScope and where you're placing bets with what you're building over the next 3 to 6
Yeah.
months?
So I think for InScope, it's it's in a space which is like deep vertical application. And my take is like accounting, it shouldn't be as complicated as it's kind of out to be. And and I feel like we are definitely positioned with how the technology is improving to kind of automate like large parts of like that goes into kind of like maintaining the books, right, and reporting accurately. And I would imagine a future where this system just kind of is kind of a switch where you just like click a button and like everything is kind of taken care of for you, and you're compliant, you're kind of reporting to the government as is needed. And I think that also kind of creates more transparency uh, across the stack.
Yeah, I definitely agree with speed, power coming in the next 3 to 6 months. I know a lot of people are talking about observability across LLMs and agents, and I think that's something that I can see evolving as well. Just a better understanding of how your LLM is trained, how it learns, and what you see, and actually seeing the conversations.
Yeah, and I think thinking models are kind of like one's first step there. So because thinking models, I think kind of one of the biggest beauty of thinking models is you're much more easily able to see from the eyes of the model. So you're able to see what thought space it's getting into based on the input, what's available for it, and that allows you to make better decision. For example, like you see the thought process and it never calls the tool that you expect it to call. But now when you kind of see how the model is thinking about it, you're like, maybe the documentation is not clear for this tool. Let me like improve the documentation. Because if I was the model, like imagine you were the model and like, oh yeah, maybe I would also not know. But just this is if this is what my view of the world is, like maybe this is, you start seeing the gaps much more easily. And I think as what you're saying is like, as we start getting more, explainability has been kind of a concept in machine learning that's just, it's been there for the ages. And as we start understanding these models better, definitely is going to help us build better stuff and much more easily, with less trial and error. Yeah.
That's the goal. You've been a legend. I think we've gone pretty deep on LLMs, agents, what they're actually like in implementation, and when to use them and how. So I want to say a massive thanks, Ankit, for come to join us, come to talk to us about LLMs, agents, and what Inscope are doing. And let's see over the next 3 to 6 months if some of what you've said comes to light. I'm pretty sure it will. But again, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Pleasure. And for people listening, likes, shares, subscribership, all that good stuff keeps our little ecosystem buzzing around. So keep on doing that. And again, Ankit, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye for now. Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found at Engineers.io. It's no underscore. We've also got a website, which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.